Hello everybody, Tom Ellsworth here, and welcome to Case Studies with the BizDoc. This week, we're going to talk about Yellowtail wine. You know, when you think about wine, you think about California, and maybe you think about France, and people that know their wine really well may know other areas of the world like Spain and Italy and even Argentina that have some great wines. But the typical American and the typical person probably doesn't think about those. They just want to have a great bottle of wine from time to time with friends. And it was an Australian company called Yellowtail that brought their brand to the United States and blew the lid off the market. I'm going to show you a couple things today when we talk about Yellowtail. The first is, lesson one will be know your target customer. They did a great job identifying the target, focusing on the target, and executing. The second thing is focus. Within anything you do, you're going to hear how they refused to step away from their plan, stayed focused on it, and it became a hit because they didn't panic and change anything. And lastly, with all types of marketing, be smart, but trust the numbers and trust the research and let that be your friend as you move forward. So let's take a look at Yellowtail. Well, Yellowtail started in Australia, as I said. There was a family, an Italian immigrant family in Australia called the Casella family. And they owned a basic large vineyard, and they were making bulk grapes and selling them to other people and marketing some wines of their own. And they were doing pretty well and enjoyed time in Australia and had a really nice market presence and everything. And in 2001, that all changed when a U.S. importer called W. Deutsch & Sons, or the Deutsch family, I guess it was called, they were a $500 million distributor in the United States, meaning they would look around the world for wines they thought that could be distributed and sold in the United States and think about a type of wine or a price point, bring all that together, and then they would go out and distribute it by selling it to wine stores and locations where you and I go and buy it. They had been doing their research and they said, you know, we've been successful with an entry-level French wine that was right around in the $20 mark, a variety of things that they were doing to play in that market. And they said, you know, there is a space in the US market for a $10 wine that could be an everyday wine or just a friends and family hanging out on the weekend wine. Not like a birthday or anniversary fine wine for special occasion, but just a wine you could drink just about any time. They did the research on the US market and they discovered the tastes of the US consumer were very specific. They found that people, if they were going to buy an inexpensive bottle of wine, they wanted it to have more of a strong fruit flavor. They didn't like certain dryness and other attributes they really weren't interested in. They were just interested in something that was easy to buy, easy to understand, and more importantly, tasted really nice and was easy to drink. The Deutsch family's knowledge of wines and growers around the world led them to Australia. And they knew in Australia there were vineyards and types of grapes that would produce the kind of fruit and the kind of wines that they were looking for the American consumer. So they reached out to the Australian Trade Commission of all people. That's right, they called the government. And they said, we're looking to partner with an Australian vineyard so that we could kind of create a brand around a wine, bring it to the United States, and we want it to be like this, like this, like this. Australia Trade Commission says, you know, it's our job to help kind of make these partnerships, and we know of somebody. So they were directed to the Casella family. Remember I mentioned them, and they've been making wines for a while. They got together with the Casella family and the Deutsch distributor from America, the Casellas, which were the Italian immigrants running an incredible vineyard in Australia. They got together and they made a partnership, a joint venture to bring a wine to the US. And the Casellas came up with the Yellowtail brand, which is the wallaby and all the coloring and everything you see here. They did the branding and marketing in line with what Deutsch had already been talking about the consumer. It was a great marriage. It worked out very, very well. They did some very clever and innovative marketing, and they brought it to the United States. You know, one of the things they did in their marketing was very, I don't know if you want to call it luck, because it really wasn't luck. There's a lot of research that was involved. But it was really, they hit it out of the park on the first try. And that was, they had some specific things they wanted to do about eliminating the complexity of buying wine and eliminating kind of the snootiness and the foo-foo-ness of, is that a good brand? Is that a good brand? They wanted to make it very, very easy for people to understand. And so they put together what they called no jargon. So no wine terminology, nothing complex, just very simple, straightforward stuff that a person coming to shop for it could easily understand and pick up a bottle of wine for friends and family and basic, daily sipping. It was really, I thought, very, very clever. So clever, in fact, that in their first year, they really took off. The Deutsch family and all the distribution they were doing in the US, they had inroads with a lot of people, including a very large grocery chain, discount grocery chain called Costco. And the Deutsch family cut a deal with Costco, which really led to the explosion of it. Well, I'm going to talk about two things now. First of all, I'm going to talk about what happened in terms of the volume, and then I'm going to get to the marketing a little bit. So let's go look at some charts. Right here, when they introduced this wine in 2001, they did about 100,000 cases. Wine is measured in how many cases did you sell. But take a look at this. In a few short years, 4.5 years, all of a sudden, they're at 8 million cases, and they, believe it or not, in 2006, I believe it was, they outsold all French wines in America. Outsold them. And this is one easy drinking, well-marketed, fantastically branded wine from Australia. So Italian immigrants operating a vineyard in Australia made a wine for the American market with the Deutsch family. You know you're in a global market when you have all those names and nationalities coming together. Nonetheless, they blew the lid off of it and were very successful. The key to the success wasn't just the Deutsch's family being able to distribute it and get it into the stores, because that was key. An experienced winery and an experienced distributor working together, they got a lot farther than any startup vineyard would, any startup winery, because one, they both had experience, but they also had a new product trying to break into a new lane, and they literally created new value. One of my favorite books I love reading from time to time, and I reread it, it's called Blue Ocean. It's a simple book about marketing strategy. You may have heard of it. If you haven't heard of it, go get yourself a copy and read through it, and I think you're really going to pick up some tips for your own marketing regardless of the company you're in. So let's take a look at the Blue Ocean model and find out what the Deutsch distributors and the Casella winemakers did that had such a tremendous effect. First of all, the Blue Ocean strategy is based on one simple premise. Let's build a new value in a brand new blue ocean that nobody has sailed on. The opposite is a red ocean where there's so many competitors, they're like sharks that are attacking each other, and it's a red ocean. And there's no fish, there's just predators attacking each other. There's probably no profits left because everybody's discounting trying to get customers, and there's probably not room for brand new products. So a blue ocean is where you create new value and a new product to have a new success. And people say, well, wait a minute, wine's been around for hundreds of years. How could this be new? Well, let's go take a look. They created a wine basically for the Coca-Cola, Budweiser consumer. This wasn't a wine for super high-end people who knew all their wines and knew all the terminology, and this wine's very dry, and this da-da-da-da-da-da, and this one's got too much tannins, and all these things that wine lovers would know. They built a great wine for the American consumer to enjoy with friends, family, whatever, and it's basically the Budweiser Coca-Cola of wines. But it's wine, and it was a great product. The Blue Ocean framework suggests this. What can you do to raise the level of certain factors above what is currently in the industry now? What can you do to reduce certain things? What can you eliminate, and what can you create? Because if you bring it all together, you might create a blue ocean where no one is sailing before. So let's take a look at what they did with Yellowtail. First, what did they reduce? Well, the first thing they reduced was wine complexity, all the jargon and everything that went along with that. And, oh, that's not a good vineyard, this is a good vineyard. Well, how do you know which vineyard's which? I'm just at Costco trying to make a decision, right? They eliminated all that. So one of the things that was nice was all the terminologies, all the stuff that went with, boom, they eliminated it. And they reduced the complexities of the understandings the consumer needed, and they created in the product an easy to drink, fruity flavor that matched with the American palate and taste. And what they found is Americans like bold fruit flavors. And you know what's interesting? it also pointed them to something else. They found in their research that this is also why Starbucks had been popular with America, because it was a strong coffee flavor. If people getting a cup of coffee, doggone it, I want a cup of coffee that tastes like coffee. Well, that same attitude is, well, you know what, I want wine that tastes like fruit, something that's fruity, not fruit juice, but something that's got a really rich and good, bold flavor. But it has to be easy drinking. And also create, a lot of fun and ease when you're going out to buy it. So they did all that, and then they eliminated a lot of the other complexities. So basically what they did, they eliminated complexities, they created a wine that was easy to understand and easy to buy, and they created a new position in the market. A wine you could buy at Costco, identify by the label what it's all about, and go enjoy a quality product, not cheap box wine that you might buy at 7-Eleven. And I'm not picking on 7-Eleven, I'm not picking on cheap box wine. There are people who enjoy that. This was different. This was really set to be a good quality wine product. And so with the Casellas and great grapes from Australia and great marketing and a distributor in the Deutsches that knew what they were doing and getting the signature on a contract from Costco, they blew the lid off the market, and suddenly they were one of not just successful with Yellowtail as a new product, they were one of the leaders in the American wine market. That's what happened. It's really interesting when I think about this, I think the lessons come back. Number one, know your target customer. They knew who they were going out. This was going to be like a Budweiser, Coca-Cola of wine, but a quality wine product, not a cheap wine that gives you a headache. Second, focus is your friend. Once they focused on the consumer, they focused on finding the right grapes and the right vineyard, which led Deutsch to talk to the Australia Trade Commission, which led them to find the Casella family. And the marriage was made. And lastly, when it's time for marketing, maybe they were trying, maybe they weren't, but they created a blue ocean for themselves, a new wine product that you didn't have to go to a wine store and buy, and go to a wine store and have to understand all this terminology and all these different, do I have to go to school before I can go to a wine store and actually buy something? No. They made it so it's easy to buy at Costco, and then when you bought it, you say, hey, this was pretty good. This was a really, really great wine to sit here this afternoon and have just great wine. When it's time for your anniversary with your wife, buy the champagne and buy the good stuff. But when you're just hang out with your friends and have a glass of wine, go pick up a Yellowtail. So the last lesson, I think, is there was a little luck, and that the Deutsch family distributors and the Casellas found each other kind of by accident, but at the end of it, I think we can see that between the two of them, this partnership was a success. So as you build your business, I think what you need to understand is there may be a little luck, but more often than not, there's a lot of intentional nature to building your business and staying focused on what it is you're doing, sticking with that, be smart about your marketing, and guess what? You may lead a market. So here we go. All right. If you like this, please come back Fridays and see these case studies, and subscribe to Valuetainment, the best content on the internet for entrepreneurs. Until then, I'm Tom Ellsworth, and I hope I left you better than I found you.